Right, good afternoon. Hello, my name's Yvette and welcome to the Friday report out. Thank you very much for coming. It's good to see that we've got plenty of people in the room to hear from our teams in Value Stream 5 and Value Stream 2. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jenny Earhart, who is Deputy Director of Finance and is going to introduce Value Stream 5. Thank you. Along with Adam and Bev and hello.
So I'm just going to do a really brief overview of Value Stream 5 as a whole, and then come on to the team for the details around the RPIW and the report out. So the overall target on the point really of Value Stream 5 is about reducing the time, 14 hours time to consultant review. On here, I don't know if you can see from the back, but in our current state, we had about 23 hours in terms of the time for that. So clearly, some work to be done. So as part of looking at what's going on in that, we were looking at the number of tests that we perform in the clerking process and were they all relevant, and that then took us to actually the number of interruptions within that clerking process. So that's what we focused the RPIW, our first RPIW on. So I'll hand off to the team.
So I'm Adam Cole, I'm Business Manager for Acute and Elderly Medicine.
Hi, my name's Bev and I'm Matron for Acute Medicine.
Hi, my name's Hannah Murray and I'm one of the Acute Medicine consultants.
So as Jenny's just mentioned, this just shows the amount of interruptions that they were getting during the clerking process. So doctors actually got interrupted about once every 9 minutes, and then that just shows the range of interruptions, and that's across just 5 patients. So only one of them interruptions across 5 patients were a necessary interruption. So it equates to about 10 interruptions a patient. So this is just our measurements so far and the things that we measured. So one of the things we looked at was the lead time, and that's the time from taking the medical record from the trolley to putting it back. And our baseline for that was 77 minutes and 18 seconds. And Morag, our Value Stream sponsor, set as a target of getting that down to 45 minutes. So we've consistently achieved that throughout the process, and at the 60-day period we're actually below that at 43 minutes and 16 seconds. Another thing we looked at were the amount of times that the junior doctor doing the clerking went up to the patient and they weren't actually available to be clerked. And that started at around about 80% of the time they weren't actually at the bed space to be clerked, and we managed to get that down to 0% at the end of the 60-day period last time. We also looked at the number of times that the clinicians interrupted during the clerking process. So again, at the start we were about 10 per patient, and we set a target of getting that down to 0. But one of the things that we've realised throughout the process is there are some interruptions that are necessary, so it's probably never going to be 0, but we should be aiming for to be as close to that as possible. And at the 60-day period we managed to get that down to just 1.4. And then the final thing that we looked at was 5S in our wards, in particular the ops rooms for J27 and 29, and for anybody who's come to the last report outs, they'll have seen the pictures of just how kind of messy the boards were in there. So you start off at a level 1, which is basically the kind of lowest level that you can be during the 5S levels, and we managed to get that up to a level 3, which just means that we're sustaining it.
Okay, so at the end of the RPIW week, we did our newspaper, which is what you can see here, and we set ourselves some goals along with the targets that we collected data about. So one of the issues that we had was that there was unclear roles and responsibilities, and that was more about the medical staff. So we designated some doctors to be the job doctors, and we designated a clerking doctor as well. And so that we could identify that and everybody knew who they were working with, we started adding the doctors onto the daily staffing board, which we've done for nurses for a long time. But while we were doing that, we also got a lot of excitement from the other people that were on the wards, like the pharmacists and the EDAT. So they're now on the boards as well, so that everybody knows who's on duty. The other board that we did was a process board, and that's a board that is up there so that everybody on the ward knows what the activity has been in the CSU for the previous 24 hours, so they know what work lies ahead really. And on that we also allow staff to rag rate themselves. So if they feel that they are okay for that day, they'll rag rate themselves green, and if they feel that they've got problems, they'll rag rate themselves red. And that's so that when we walk round, we can see at a glance whether people need support. One of the other issues was that medical notes weren't always available, so to combat that we make sure that all wards do a priority list now, and that means that the consultant can have those notes available when they need to see that patient first thing on the morning. Kanban cards, this is why we've not quite achieved what we need to achieve. It's still a problem for us, it's still not always happening, there's a lot of repetition and reminding people that that's what we need to do. Patients not always available for clerking, as Adam said, so we put a simple measure in so that the doctor goes to the patient and says, I'm going to clerk, come and see you in 10 minutes, can you please make sure you're there? And that's had a really good result. Repetition of information, so we found that doctors were transcribing patients' medications from the PPN system into the admission book, which meant that there was room for error, and when pharmacy came they said that roughly about 6 out of 8 transcribed drugs had errors on them. Might be only simple ones, but they had errors on them. So now we print that from PPM and we staple it in the book, so reducing errors. And also in the book, we had, in the admission book, we had doctors asking a question and nurses asking the same question. So now we only ask the patient once and we refer back to that page. S5, we've achieved, we've come 3/4 of the way with that. We actually achieved the options, which is what we set out to do. But since then, it's given the wards appetite to do more S5, so that's why we said we've not achieved it, because there's more to do. And Ward 27 are actually teaming up with one of the Regis Will to be sort of a pilot ward for organising the CSSD rooms, the stock rooms. So he's met with the staff and we're going to be meeting with him in a couple of weeks about relabelling and then standardising that across the trust. And then in the week we were all aiming to have a clinical assessment team, so a team that goes and admits people as they come in. But we weren't sure whether that was going to work or not, and so we were worried that we were trying to aim towards something that we'd not tested. So Hannah here agreed to test that, and she's going to talk to you about that in just a minute. So areas for continued focus is we've identified areas on the wards for the clerking doctor to sit. Sometimes that's happening, sometimes it's not. It depends on personalities. Sometimes doctors don't like to be moved away from their colleagues, but that's something that we are working on because we feel we could get the time down even further if we have them in an area where they can concentrate. Kanban cards I've talked about, and the only other thing for us is about the measurements. Sometimes it's difficult to fit the measurements into your daily work, and so it's about planning ahead for that. So over to Hannah.
Hi, so we decided at the end of the week to just pilot this integrated clinical assessment on a Wednesday afternoon. So the reasons for that, we've seen that the time to consult and review was average about 23 hours and we were aiming for 14 hours. But actually we thought if we could bring the consultant much closer to the patient's admission in time-wise, then that would be really useful. We also wanted to have more of an integrated approach, so myself, the trainees or the advanced care practitioners, the pharmacists, EDAT and the nurse, just having more of an integrated approach to the patient rather than all of us doing separate things separately and often doing the same thing and lots of repetition happening. So we got a lot of sign up from, we had a pharmacist allocated to us, EDAT were really happy to help, the nurses were really enthusiastic about it and our trainees were, so that was great. So we trialled it on a Wednesday afternoon in July and then we took it on to August as well because it was working well. And I just wanted to tell you about a couple of patients that I saw, which I think it worked really well. So we saw a 30-year-old autistic chap from a supported living home who came with 3 fits. So we hit the ward, me and the trainee doctor went to see him straight away, The pharmacist had a look through his meds on PPM, populated the meds at the same time as I was assessing the patient. We then came back after I'd assessed the patient with the trainee and discussed with the pharmacist, who told us that he was on an antihistamine that lowered the seizure threshold and we should definitely stop that. In the meantime, the nurse went and took some additional information from the patient, and I got EDAT to see the patient as well to make sure he was okay on his feet, because he'd been complaining a little bit of being unsteady. We rang the neurologist, who advised us to start him on lamotrigine. The pharmacist then, much better than I could have done, put on the EDAN, the lamotrigine, and the increasing dose and things was really clear. While I went back and spoke to the patient, the EDAN was populated and done, and the patient was discharged within about an hour of hitting the acute medical unit. We may have had to keep him a bit longer if he wasn't in supported living, but it worked really, really well, and actually got really good feedback from the pharmacist, who was using their clinical skills much more than just ringing around and getting those e-meds done when a junior doctor had already populated them and maybe they weren't correct or something. So that was really, really good. And then a 68-year-old that was on the corridor in one of the on the ward 27 with a daughter, a lady with dementia, coming with delirium. We took her into the day room, we had a chat. She'd already been seen in the emergency department and had some bloods and chest x-ray, and there was no obvious acute medical problem. So because her daughter was there, which often is not the case when you see them 12 hours, 14 hours down the line, we had a chat. We gave her the options of mum staying in, the problems with that, or going home, and her daughter would stay with her for a couple of days. They could always come back if mum deteriorated. We then got EDAT to see the patient. The pharmacist had already done the e-meds and populated them in the EDAN, and the patient, and after EDAT had seen the patient, they were turned around very, very quickly. And I think both of those patients had a really good experience, and importantly as well, the MDT, we really worked together, and there was a load of good feedback from that, from all members of it. So we're going forward. It was a very small amount of patients, so maybe we saw about 9 or 10 patients in this format, and I've spoken to my consultant colleagues, and we're going to roll that out into Monday afternoons as well. We're going to try and get some official patient feedback from the MDT team, of which we've got some. Adam's going to help facilitate with timings and looking at retrospectively the notes and seeing how it all works, and going forward really trying to join up with the frailty work that's ongoing, which in a way is very similar, I think, trying to give that integrated clinical assessment to frailer patients, and seeing if we can join up with them to work with them to deliver it. This patient feedback we've stolen from frailty, so you'll have to excuse us, but it's kind of the same.
Tell them that, to be fair.
Yeah. It's such good feedback from giving that integrated clinical assessment quick, early in the patient's journey, and I think we think as a team that it's the way to go. There are barriers in terms of workforce, like there always are, consultant time, having one consultant dedicated to this, but that's something to work on. And the other thing is, does it actually need to be done on an acute medical unit? Can we bring it even closer to the front door by doing it in the emergency department, or maybe a co-located ambulatory care kind of setting? And that's where we're hopefully heading towards.
So this is his latest set of measurements, and I think even we've continued to be surprised by the results and just how well it's worked now. The processes are all embedded. It's very rarely now that any patient clerking takes over 50 minutes, and that's with a new set of junior doctors. And on the last set of measurements, the frailty unit had actually had an impact in reducing it even further. So on the 90-day measurements, it's gone up to 46 minutes, which is slightly over our target, but it's consistently remained around the 45-minute target that we've set. And we've actually seen a change of 31 minutes from the start of the process to the end in just a 90-day period. Again, the other thing that we looked at was the amount of times that the patient wasn't ready for the medical interview, and that's gone down from 80%, and we've managed to sustain it at 0% this time. So that's 2 months on trot where the patient's always been ready for the medical interview. And then we also looked at interruptions, which I touched upon earlier, so that's gone down from 10 per patient to just 0.8 per patient, so that's a difference of 9.2 that it's come down per patient clerking. And then again, around the 5Sing, that's probably remained at a level 3 for the reasons that Bev talked about earlier. In terms of continued improvements, we want to continue to embed the designated clerking areas with the junior doctor team. Bev's touched upon it, but they're not always using it, and it kind of depends on personal preference. But we feel that if we can get people using it all the time, it'd be possible to get the lead time down to probably about 35 minutes. We think that'd be a reasonable target to set. We want to further expand the trial of the MDT team, so this is the thing that's getting us closer to the 14-hour standard and the thing that the whole value stream is focused on. And this is, we've already started expanding it, as Hannah said, we're doing the Monday afternoons and the Wednesday afternoons now, but we want to just continue to progress that and hopefully get it every day of the week. And everything that we've proved in use on acute floor, we want to see if it would be useful to all of our CSU and look at rolling it out to the speciality wards. I think the bit on interruptions would be especially useful. And then the other thing that we want to continue to do is myself, Morag and Bev meet on a monthly basis to make sure that, because it's been so successful for us, that it continues to be successful and remain embedded in the future as well.
So key learning we broke down into MDT and communication. So for us, we found we didn't set up meetings initially with the whole RPIW team. It was more sort of Morag, myself and Adam that were getting together. And we're not the ones that can make the decisions about how we move forward, so it's about involving the whole team. The clinical assessment team trial was really successful, patient experience has improved, all the patients seen were seen well within the 14 hours, and we appreciate that's not a lot of patients, but the more we roll out, the more patients we're going to capture. And the job satisfaction for staff was much better. Communication-wise, that for our next RPIW, we're going to suggest that people pre-plan meetings, because we've been trying to plan meetings with a week's notice, and with people's diaries that's very difficult. So we need to have more planning going into it. And just small changes result in a big change overall. It's just keeping on with those little changes to have the big improvements that we want. So the thanks, as always, to our KPO team for supporting us. The teams on 27 and 28, in particular the sisters Bridget and Kira, who have been tirelessly pushing for these things to happen and maintain them. Morag for our sponsor for setting us the targets and working with us. Hannah for her enthusiasm. And Ida and Pharmacy for helping us with our clinical assessment team. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That was a fabulous report out. We're going to hear from Value Stream 2 next, and then we're going to have questions for both value streams. But well done, thank you. So Penny and Tim, Value Stream 2.
Hiya, I'm Tim Hiles, I'm the General Manager for Abdominal Medicine and Surgery.
And I'm Penny McSorley, I'm Head of Nursing for Abdominal Medicine and Surgery. Today we're reporting out on our discharge following TURP. This is our value stream. We started about 18 months ago with our sponsor development session, and many of you will have been to report out before. We've done 4 RPIWs now, taking us from the beginning of the patient's journey for a TURP in the Paul Sykes Centre and being prepared and being pre-assessed, through to clinical pathways, through to EDAN, and through to what we call the TWOC service, which is the trial without catheter service. Through our value stream meetings with Yvette, Yvette is our exec sponsor on this, we had learnt that many of our teams are really engaged and doing RPIWs, but we asked ourselves the questions of, were we spreading that, and were we telling everybody in the urology service, but also in our CSU, what we've been doing, and were we celebrating? Because our high level metrics across the value stream, we're seeing some real improvements, and Tim's going to go on and show you our higher level metrics in the value stream. we kind of felt that some of our teams, if they'd been involved in an RPIW week, felt really engaged, but actually what had we done to try and bring the wider urology team together and celebrate what we'd been doing.
Sorry.
So we
Can't work the technology, obviously.
a couple of weeks ago, we asked ourselves the question, how could we get everybody together in one room? And when could we do that, and how could we do that? So we commandeered our urology audit day on the 7th of September. So this is our morning that we have out for audit purposes. That's Ollie Kays, one of our consultants who led the event, I think it's fair to say. And we had a really good representation from the clinicians, the registrars, from theatres, from the nursing staff, and from the admin teams as well. And it was really, really positive about saying 18 months on, where are we? What can we celebrate? What's still really difficult? And, you know, don't get me wrong, I was the sponsor for EDANS, and it's still proving quite difficult for us to affect some of the changes in that RPIW. That photograph actually that was taken by me and tweeted by me, and actually it's not the best picture in the world of anybody on there, but
You can see the enthusiasm shining out.
I suddenly realised it was a terrible photograph, but it was the only one that I had that I tweeted on that day. We got some real energy and enthusiasm across the morning. So the nice things for us, it was a clinician-led event, and we got good representation from our clinicians and good engagement from our medical teams. We had a report out from each of the process owners from the 4 RPIW saying what had worked well, what hadn't worked well, what were still our challenges. We also had an improvement fellow there who's working with us, one of our pharmacy colleagues, Catherine, talking about other things that are happening around RPIW3 and EDANS and some of the work that she's doing. We looked at our high-level metrics, we celebrated our successes, and it was a chance while we were all in the room to try and agree some actions about where do we go now and where do we go going forward. And some of those were unexpected. You know, people sort of, you know, some of our medical colleagues saying, do you know what, I would quite happily write an EDAN in theatre, I just need some training. I don't use e-meds, but I'd quite happily be trained on that. So I think it was really important for us to celebrate where we've come in that time. It was also good to talk about some of the other things that the urology service is doing, and when I visit the urology ward, which is J42 and J43, which is our short stay ward, they are taking lots and lots of different things forward. Scan for safety, e-obs, e-meds, some of the work around the safety huddles, and they are, I think what Leeds Improvement Method has done for them is that they've become really proactive in making improvements, and I feel really proud about that. So it was a really positive day. This was our high-level value stream, and if you can see all the kind of speech bubbles, if you like, across the top, where all the things that were variations for our patients between consultants, between the way one ward did it and the way another ward did it, the way if you went through David Beavers you got a slightly different experience in there. And our whole value stream, we've moved quite a lot of things around in our value stream, because actually our trial without catheter was kind of in the middle here on the ward, and our patients were waiting for a long time to get their catheter removed or fail their trial or have it put back in, and we've moved this down to this end of the process now. So our actual value stream doesn't really look like it started out, because we've moved some of the processes to the other end of the journey for the patient. But I'll hand over to Tim and he can talk about our high-level metrics.
I think one of the key things that we got from the day was, during the work that we've done in each of the RPIWs, we tend to focus on the stuff that's still to be done, the bits where we haven't quite got it right, or where we've changed things and the whole question has shifted slightly. So we've moved from there to the end of the process. That has changed that sort of question, what we're trying to address in some of the work that we're doing. And we focus on what we're still to do, what's on the newspaper that hasn't been completed yet. And we do that at the stage for each RPIW, and we get down to quite very detailed analysis of individual steps in the process. some of the value that we got out of this event was taking a step back and saying, let's all look at the original things that we wanted to influence by doing this work. And we've got a new way of reporting, and we've got a table that's similar to the one that you were presenting with all the metrics on there, but we've sort of put these into, Chris has put these into tables for us. Thanks, Chris. And the interesting thing for us to look at was these were the things that we wanted to improve. That one's better, that one's better, that is, and that is. We've got a couple of gaps there, but we'll talk through some of the ones and where we have had success. We don't want to be bringing patients back to hospital unnecessarily. So we looked at, one of our key metrics was the readmissions or reattendances for patients coming back in. The blue line there is patients reattending A&E after a TURP. That's come down. Purple line is the numbers that were readmitted. In Q4, no patient who had a TURP was readmitted to hospital. And then we've got the percentage coming back to the ward. So we've improved that in every area that we've measured. The lead time, the time that our patients spend on the ward after coming back from recovery, that has come down fairly significantly. And our length of stay has come down. We are releasing capacity by doing this work that we are using to treat other patients. Sorry, my fingers aren't working now. And this one, slightly complicated, but we've looked at the length of stay for all of our TURP patients over the years. So 14, 15, we're talking about 1 day, 2 day, 3 day length of stay. We haven't really shifted to 3 day length of stay. These are patients that we actually think probably need to be in hospital for other reasons. It's not just because of the recovery following surgery. However, this one, we were fairly consistent, 86, 89 patients staying for 2 days. That's come down to 60. So we've shifted patients, whereas this one has gone up, patients staying 1 day, and actually same day surgery has gone up fairly significantly. We're on course to repeat that this year. I think there is further work that we can do to move patients up that scale. But we are doing what we set out to achieve by moving patients towards day pace and shortening their length of stay. Profitability, or reducing the loss, as maybe it should be termed this. But that has reduced the cost that we are having to our patients who are going through this surgery. And that is actually about a £40,000 saving, which, 40 grand there are a couple of members of staff in there that we have actually saved, and clearly is a benefit to the organisation. So I think we reflected a bit on what we've actually learned from having this event. I'm touching this screen. I didn't know this screen did it. I've gone now. There we are. So we reflected on how we've communicated what we're doing in this work. And there is a balance to be struck. We were very conscious at the start of doing this, of going out to the surgeon and saying, we're going to bring in this new method of putting in change, and it's all going to be brilliant, and we're going to improve things dramatically. And I was very conscious of promoting cynicism, or allowing cynicism to come out of some of our teams. Yes, we've been here before. We've all seen change projects coming into organisations. You'll sit around for a couple of years, tell us how to do it, and then we'll all go back to doing it how we used to do it. So we restricted some of the information that we were sending out. We were trying to tell people about the work that we were doing, where we were having success, but not talking about the overall picture. Having the consultants in the room, they were genuinely really impressed with the work that we'd done. And particularly once we could say, look, here is data, here is what we've done, here is the proof that we have been successful in this work. And it really did engender a lot of enthusiasm. And tying the individual pieces of work together was really important for the members of the RPIW teams, because some of them have felt incredibly frustrated. I mean, I don't know if any of you have been at the report outs with Jane Broxham, who can be a bit, we've still got lots to do. Yes, Jane, we've still got lots to do. We sat down with her and reviewed her newspaper. It is almost all complete, but we've found the additional work to do. And that's the next point, is we are moving into a state of continual improvement. We've achieved what we set out to do largely on Jane's newspaper, but there is an enormous amount of work still to do to further improve what we're getting, and that's the cultural change that we're sort of aiming for from doing this work. that thing is really, really important. It is really easy for these teams to get down because they can still see the amount of work that's still to do, and actually coming back together and saying this is working is important for maintaining the morale and resilience of the teams that are going through this. And success does breed success. You know, we were sat in that meeting and more people want to be involved. We could be doing this, we could be doing this. We'll set a standard for consultants in the way that they're going to refer patients to TWOT. I can't believe it when they, you know, that came out of a body of consultants sat in that room. It's like, yeah, we'll tick that off the box straight away. And that's all I've got to say, really.
Honestly, I think that was a really good report out, and it was so honest, so real, and having been in some of the, well, in all of the sponsor team meetings, that ability to keep going when it feels like you are taking one step forward and sometimes 2 steps back, or you are swimming through treacle, is really important. But the you know, as they say, a rolling stone does gather moss, and it has gathered momentum. So thank you very much. So thank you to both teams, but I would like to now come and ask you if you will stand on stage and be open to any questions. So have we got questions for either of the teams? I hope you've got questions for both teams, actually. Tim.
So I've got a question for you, because you've had such success in moving the time for, what is it, clerking of patients, and that seems to have been embedded over a period of a few months. Might just be slightly unfair, but are you going to challenge yourself to reduce that further then? Because you've achieved it.
I think that's the idea of us continuing to meet with Morag to see if we can push it further and further each month.
Yeah.
So that's your answer.
Initially, Morag did set a time of, did you say 30 minutes? No, before
No,
that,
said,
when we said no.
Yeah.
So Morag said 30 minutes initially, and we were like, no chance. But we think that if we do the few more things and embed it a bit better, we might just get there.
Brilliant.
Helen.
So congratulations to both teams. It's really nice to see you two perky, because I think
Pinky and perky.
Wait, Phil is pinky.
Hearing previous reports out, I felt it from you, know, especially Penny, I think, with the E-dance, and so it's really nice to see you at this point. The thing that struck me particularly, well, a lot of it struck me about the acute med work, but I can't remember, Bev, or one of you said, we realised that doctors were asking patients one question and nurses were asking the same questions, and we hear that time and time again, don't we? And I just thought, oh, brilliant. And I suppose I was thinking, is there any way that you can stretch that along our pathways? Because repeatedly we ask the patients the same question again, and then a different professional asks them the same question again. It's not just at clerking, is it? It's right the way through their journey. I don't know if that falls into your remit, but...
That's one of the things that we actually parked as part of our RPIW, and looking at expanding it into ED as well. I think that's one of the things that we're going to revisit over the course of the 18 months, because that did come up and everybody agreed it'd be good to get it from ED.
That was just too big to tackle in this.
And to a certain degree, that having sort of, you know, for the collateral history, so sometimes one of the nurses who was working with me would go and take the collateral history, because they did it anyway in their assessment, and then we went in and did it. And I always think for patients, if you ask them the same questions over and over again, A, it's just not a good experience, and B, they think sometimes that they're giving the wrong answer, so they need to change, you know, sort of, shall I give another answer? So I think it's really important, and I think for us, in terms of doing the integrated clinical assessment and thinking about whether actually we can get even closer to the front door, sort of, you know, maybe missing out that emergency department clerking and then the acute medical clerk and that kind of thing, just making it all more streamlined is where we're aiming for.
Good. And David, and then Joe.
Back to the acute medicine again. You mentioned about bringing your process from the acute floor into A&E, but is the ultimate to actually do even a virtual clinic? Could you have managed the patients you've described by offering that expertise over the phone, over a sort of Skype link to either a nursing home or to the district nurse, or so that actually the patient doesn't have to even come to A&E in the first place, but you can alter medication, you can provide that reassurance. Is that possible?
So when we did the frailty trial, we actually, the consultant that was in the frailty for that day sort of vetted all GP calls, and so they were able to stop some admissions coming in and give advice. They were also able to give advice to some doctors from CDU and things, so there was a lot of advice given, and some patients were brought back to the new elderly virtual ward, but you've got an existing virtual ward where they manage a lot of patients. But yeah, I think we could.
And we tend to, at the moment, we have, so one of the acute medicine consultants takes the calls from the GP and decides where they should go. And often, we can say, actually, you're probably looking at those bloods, you need to come back for an iron infusion, just come back tomorrow to the ambulatory care unit, or actually you don't need to be seen today, it's 4 o'clock in the evening, come back tomorrow and we'll see you in one of our hot clinics and stuff. But absolutely, I think in different hospitals in the area, I think Airedale is one of them that does sort of telemedicine, as it were.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
That system being performed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely one to think about.
They've got really good quality technology, so that you can actually visualise the patient as well. So, but I think it works particularly well in the care homes, and I know the Leeds GPs have talked about it. So that might be something we'll be able to do. Joe.
That was a statement. Really impressive both sets of reports. I just keep remembering when we were looking at that graph type representation that those are patients really. And I used to like the earlier version of reporting where we had those human stories about it was so good the patients hadn't even booked their transport home because they expected it to look longer, and they had to catch up their improved expectations. So the question really is, and it does translate to both teams, what would you do differently? And that could be a really technical answer about what you've experienced in value streams, or it could be the emotional version about how you manage expectations with the very first people in the room before they even start doing the work.
To build on one of the points that you made, I think one of the things that we learned probably from the second RPIW, and we were very conscious of putting in place for the last RPIW we did was, what's the expectations of the team after the week when they've been brought together and had this really intense environment and got a lot done, giving them the time and making sure that meetings are arranged ahead of time to get back together to reflect on what's done, because there's a couple of bits of work where we've stalled by just not being able to get people into a room for weeks sometimes. The way diaries align with doctors and people on shifts and so on has been really difficult. So actually flagging that up to the team, you will be expected to meet and you will need to create a time when you can meet, and you may as well do that now before we've even gone into the room, because afterwards that's when the work and the slog is going to happen.
I'm going to actually pick on Jill to just say something that she might or may not remember saying when we had the meeting of all the RPIWs together, and you talked about your surprise about what some of the patients said to you about wanting to be in hospital or not.
Yeah, I think it was challenging our own ideas really, because as a manager I thought I knew what a patient wanted, so I thought a patient wanted to be in hospital until they were really ready to go home at a reasonable time. But for our RPIW, we went and spoke to the patients on the wards, and one of the questions I asked every single patient was, if I could get you home, but it would be at 11 o'clock tonight, would you go home? And they said yes, which really shocked me, and a few of us were like, wow, really, you'd want to go home? And they were like, yeah, because we just don't want to be in hospital. And it just challenges you, and actually doing the RPIW made us all think very differently about the patient when they're in hospital and what they want. So yeah, it shocked us all, and it made us really different in our approach to the whole thing.
And I'm just going to pick on Stuart actually, because I don't know, and apologies Stuart, but were you in the meeting of the urologist, or were you not able?
No, I wasn't able to.
Right. Okay, but one of the things that has come out of Value Stream 1 as well was that sometimes people have an expectation that the consultants will be difficult. And I honestly don't know why anyone would think that. but we've had several members of staff who've said to have been surprised at how the consultants were ready to take on some of this work. So whether it was about completing forms in outpatients for orthopaedic surgeons, or actually the response from the urology surgeons, and you know, actually you've been the first medical team that we've actually worked with in the value streams. They have actually focused quite a bit on surgical pathways. So they actually really do want to improve things, don't they? So
I think we've been able to get into conversations about what next, and about and some of the things that I hadn't realised that were coming in urology. There is a procedure called the Urolift, which may ultimately take prostate surgery into being something a procedure that's done in a clinic, using a new technique, and we've been able to talk about that. And actually, we've been talking about moving prostate treatment, if you like, into a day case. But actually, what I hadn't realised, that some of the technology that's come in might actually, you know, make it a procedure in an outpatient, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. And I didn't realise that and one of our surgeons is, you know, very interested in it, and other trusts are doing this as well. So I think it's questioned, and I suppose we talked quite a bit at the day towards the end about scheduling and about day case and what it really means to, and challenging ourselves as a CSU of what do you do as a day case, and what do we bring in, what patients do we bring in the night before, and what could be a day case, what needs to be done on this site, what could be done on another site, i.e. Wharfdale. And I think it's enabled us to get into all of those conversations about where is the best place. I've had the same conversations with the nurse cystoscopists this week about, you know, do we need to be bringing patients into St James's, or could we do that? With more nurse cystoscopists, what could we do? And I think that's the real positive for me, is that the feeling from the team has been, we can improve, we can do this. So it was really good to have those discussions.
great, thank you. Jo, I think you wanted to say.
It's a comment rather than a question, but open to other comments. I think our experience in medicine was that actually we're trying to share out how many of the consultants can be involved in any one week, because we've got a few people that are really interested and wanting to engage. So that's a really positive thing. The other is that what I saw was a really strong junior doctors and training engagement, and some really positive feedback for them, and thanking us for involving them in it. And they actually give a really strong contribution to the certainly to the RPW weeks, but in an ongoing way as well. And I didn't know if that was similar across the RPIWs, and if there's more we should be doing around that.
I mean, I don't think it's. I think the junior doctors who have been involved in other value streams have found it really enjoyable and rewarding, and they've made a great contribution, but their rotations and their shifts have made it really difficult for them to continue to contribute, certainly in value stream 2. But I do think we need to explore more about the culture within junior doctors. What do they need to feel supported? Because a theme has been, it was the same in neurosciences, let's put the junior docs over here on their own and stop interrupting them, and they can get the job done quicker. And actually they haven't really engaged with it. So the question being, is it the support that they need? Do they actually like asking one another? So as they're writing something up, are they busy actually getting some peer support, or asking a more senior doctor? So I think we probably need to explore that in a bit more depth.
I think that was one of the, when we were talking about the integrated clinical assessment and being sort of consultant at the point of admission, and it was great having Jess in the room in the value stream to kind of absolutely say, well, hang on, what does that make my role? You know, where do I fit in this? I don't just want to be someone who's taking notes because the consultant's doing the assessment. And it actually proved to be so good. Some of the times I would watch the trainee or the ACP assess the patient and do a work-based assessment with them. It was really good to have that time with the trainee or the ACP, so they felt that you know, you could explain your decision making, they could bounce ideas off you, you could bounce ideas off them, you could ask them what you know, if they thought what you were doing was the right thing. So I think it's really important. We can make it all about having the consultant seeing the patient as early as possible, but how do we become decision makers as consultants? We need to train the trainees to make those decisions. But the feedback that we got from our team was that they really enjoyed that, spending that time with us on that one-to-one kind of basis. But
okay, well, thank you very much. Chris?
Just to say, we've got cohort 6 of Leeds leaders going on down at the bridge, and they're all watching, so can we just say hello to them?
Hello, cohort 6! All right, well, we're hoping to hear from you in future report outs, so thank you for joining us. Finally, I just wondered, and I don't know whether it's possible, but we've got a perfect week coming up, and I wondered if a perfect week would include that integrated clinic Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in a perfect week, but I don't know if it's possible.
She's nodding.
But maybe you've already thought about it. Okay, well, thank you very much. Has anybody got any final questions? In that case, I'll thank you all for attending Report Out. I hope that you have all heard something you might take back into your own areas and think about how you might be able to do things differently, but also that you know, you're hearing how the Leeds improvement method on the ground is challenging but rewarding. So thank you very much, everybody.